The Labor Party on display this week as it heads into the national conference starting Thursday in Brisbane is likely to be a very different Labor Party than the one the Prime Minister presented to us prior to the election. Then it was all about, trust me, it's just safe change. Now, of course, it's about changing the country. Then it was all about keeping AUKUS, keeping the stage 3 tax cuts and cutting your power prices. Now, of course, it's dumping AUKUS, scrapping the tax cuts and cutting emissions come what may, even if that sends industry offshore. Or at least that's what will happen if Labor conference delegates have their way on the weekend. And unlike the coalition, where policy always remains the preserve of elected MPs, well, in the Labor Party, policy is actually set by the party conference, and it's supposed to be binding on governments, including prime ministers. A Labor conference, I might add, that doesn't just have party members with a seat at a table, but also some of our country's most militant unions. And that's why this conference on the weekend matters. And that's why how things are handled in coming days will be as good a guide as any to the real nature of the Albanese government. This will be the first national conference in decades where the left have the numbers. Now, will it use its numbers to try and force the government to break key promises, such as the commitment to keep AUKUS and the final round of those legislated tax cuts? Will senior ministers go onto the conference floor to argue the case for government policy in a showdown with left-wing delegates? Or might there be some sort of weak fudge, the PM taking on key issues, standing up there on the conference floor, but the really difficult stuff taken off the public agenda, debated behind closed doors, the backroom deals stitched up, where you were kept in the dark as a voter? What's been obvious in the build-up to this conference is just how left-wing modern Labor has become. Dozens and dozens of branches have demanded that the conference force the government to end logging in native forests, even though that sustains thousands of timber jobs. And the fact that wood is a sustainable resource, that's not on the table either. And that if we terminate the industry here, well, it will only make us ever more dependent on foreign timber imports, often from countries with little to no environmental protections. Likewise, we've had dozens of branches and unions demanding the scrapping of AUKUS because they instinctively want to turn soldiers into social workers and have a deep nuclear phobia, even though stronger armed forces, including a beefed-up strategic deterrent, are essential for Australia's security. Now, I'd be surprised if the Prime Minister stands up at the conference to tell his own left faction that it's been dead wrong to be against military alliances and against nuclear power, because that would have to be a personal mea culpa for him as well, given for the past 40 years or so, these are the very things that Albanese, as a man of the left faction, has long campaigned for. Let's hope he proves me wrong, but at least one Labor minister is trying to get the Australian people to face facts. Today, the Energy Minister, Madeleine King, told a conference in Perth that the East Coast urban Australians have forgotten the sources of our wealth and that wishful thinking was putting our prosperity at risk. People have lost sight, she said, of where much of the nation's prosperity, food and energy comes from. In the financial year that's just ended, said Madeleine King, our resource and energy export earnings, led by coal, iron ore, gold, aluminium and gas, are forecast to hit a record $459 billion. Now, if we're to stay a rich country and pay our way in the world, which we couldn't do, of course, without all of these exports, including the fossil fuels that Labor's green activists can't stand, if that's the case, and we know it is, then let's hope King has some sway around the cabinet table. But it's one thing to tell a Bush summit, Madeleine King, what it wants to hear. It's quite another thing to tell a Labor conference what it won't want to hear. And that's the issue. Are ministers prepared to take on the hard left inside their own party and win? Or will they sell out the national interest on the weekend for a quick factional fix?